So you're recording rather than doing anything else. So when you want me to get started or when you're ready for me, just let me know. I know we're not live streaming.
I am recording now.
So you'll just, okay, do what you got to do. Yeah, we don't have enough uploadable speed. Well, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. Well, we'll let the 6 bells ring and then we'll get started.
I thought that'd be a nice ambiance.
What's that?
Bells ringing.
The bells tell you it's time to get started. It's a lot easier than Irving and I go 1, 2, 3 up to 11, isn't it?
Short 6.
The very fast 6, right?
Oh, we got music.
We got music. I forgot that. You would think I'd know that living next door, but I guess I'll just get up and do this real quick. Well, I'm stuck with myself here. How are you tonight? How did MRI go for Jennifer? It went fine. Or as fine as MRIs go, we won't find out till Tuesday.
You come on this side.
No, Emma had pre-ops and got her eyes dilated and whatnot, and so she's ready to go tomorrow morning. This is Poland. I hate this. I'm going to move this up here. So tomorrow morning, we have to go back to Charlotte again. So I will have been to Charlotte on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday and Saturday. No, she has not, but she's hurting pretty good today. I'm done enough. My VNG, I'm always dizzy, but that's just how it is apparently. It's going to be a headache thing, so it's fine. My VNG test came back. I passed it, and that was an experience. If you've ever had water sprayed in your ear to make you dizzy, that's something.
They did that to Becky.
It was horrible.
And everybody teased her afterwards. They said, oh, there's nothing between your ears.
It's horrible. But at any rate, the next step will be, for a different reason, will be a sleep study because I have some issues with that. So. But no, my headache doctor will manage my headaches and we'll figure it out. Thank you. Speaking of which, let's open in a word of prayer. Loving God, as we gather tonight to study your scriptures and to begin to talk about the word that dwells among us, we pray for your wisdom and your understanding and your peace as we study in Jesus' name. Amen. It moves a little bit on. Welcome to our study time. We're in the Gospel of John. That's where we're starting at. And I have to give you, those who have been here before know this, but if you haven't been here and you don't know this yet, there's the only real rule or sort of framework that we go with is don't get ahead of the story. Like at this point, they don't have any of this. Like when we read John 1, we know how the story ends. They don't. So you've got to put yourself in that position. Although Matthew, Mark, and Luke have already been written and are somewhat dispersed by this point as John is written, they don't have that to work with. So when this stuff comes up, you and I know the end of the story. We know John 20. We know resurrection. We know what happens. No one else does who's reading it. So stay in the moment. Okay, stay in the moment. As we did in Isaiah and as we did in Acts, stay in the moment and try not to get ahead. It is hard. The text that I'll use, the translation that I use, although I brought my New Living with me because I like that one too a lot, is I usually use the NRSV, but it does not matter. And if you have a different translation that you brought, that's good because it will give us a chance to get a cross section because we're going to study very slow and very methodical and sort of see what kind of comes up. And as we go through it, I'll give you stuff like this, handouts and things to sort of look at as we're going through it, and we'll see what we learn together. Sound like a plan, Irvin? All right. I can tell you right now, Irvin's got a 1611 King James with him, so we're ready. And we'll be jumping back and forth because the verbs will be different, the language is different, and that's important when you're trying to dissect what's happening. So John's gospel opens with this prelude, and we're going to just do the prelude at this point, the first 5 verses. We have company apparently who's floating around here. Oh, and before we get too far down the line, there is a little bit of food over there, and there's sweet and unsweet tea. If you want some, please help yourself. If you want to get up during and go grab something to drink or eat, do it. That's what it's there for. What's that? He may go over there. He may enjoy that. So that's all right. All right, so John 1:1. What things come up here? John's introduction, the Word becoming flesh. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, The Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. Now, rather than getting a standard incarnational narrative, which we won't get in John, we will not get the incarnation the way you think of it. We'll get this, and we'll deal with this. So before we talk about what I've noticed and what I found and what I see, what thoughts or questions? What thoughts or questions does this little prelude bring to your mind? What things do you notice in here? Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, right? It sounds like the beginning. And you should have heard that. I think that's by design, too. Does it though? Well, to you it does, but does it though? That's in Genesis, but we're not in Genesis, we're in John. Yeah, but in Genesis, you do get a certain bit of plurality, right? Let us make mankind in our image. But here we don't get that, do we, as much? But you do hear a very, in the beginning, I mean, it says in the beginning. That's exactly what it is. I think it's a reference to Genesis at the beginning. Yeah, twice. In the beginning, that's right, twice you get the Bible. Oh, I can do that. Okay, when's the first tennis match?
I saw that a Little House on Prairie one time.
No tennis match? Joseph served in Pharaoh's court? Yeah, I can do this all day.
Oh, my goodness.
You don't want me to do this all day. But yeah.
Sure, go ahead.
No, you don't want to do this all day. So yeah, you've got a little bit of Genesis here happening. What else is happening here? What else are you noticing? What else is coming to your mind as you read this?
I have a question.
Listen, B, you need to go someplace. Yes.
In the beginning.
Yes.
Was the Word.
Yes.
And then the Word was with God. Does that mean that's Jesus?
That's the question.
No, I'm asking.
That's the question. No, you're asking me. That's right. That's the question, isn't it? So if you turn to your handy dandy, because we have to talk about it, right? The Logos, which is the word there. We have to talk about it because you've got to understand the relationship that's happening. The handout, that's what I said. It's the very first thing. The word, the Logos, however you have been taught to say it, that's what it is. And I left you some thoughts by I don't remember who wrote that. So I said this to Donna this morning in the office, and this will happen in this section quite a bit. The author of John is going to borrow, and this is one of them, he's going to borrow concepts from modern scholarship of his time. Specifically, he's borrowing ideas from Homer. Now, is he saying Homer is the Bible? No, not at all. But he's kind of saying, here's what you've had before, and let me teach you why God is better. Like, let me use your own words to teach you about God. So in this, the Logos is the Word. Pull that up and I'll tell you exactly what it says.
Go back to, what is he borrowing? Who is he borrowing from?
Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Okay.
He's borrowing Logos from him. Like the word here that we have for Logos, word, is a statement, a speech, divine utterance. That's what it means. Is it Jesus? That's up to us, right? He's setting the stage. He's going to tell us, right? We can get ahead of the story, but he's going to tell us that. That's going to be the thing, right? Something existed at the beginning of time with God. That's what he's saying, right? It wasn't just God, there was something there.
With God and was God.
And was God. Like, so he's borrowing a concept and building off of it. So I know it doesn't really answer your question, is that word Jesus, but we've kind of interpreted it as it is, haven't we? Or as Jesus would say, you have heard it said whatever. And then he builds off of that onto more. That's what John's doing. But he's saying, like, you've heard it said in popular parlance, this. Let me tell you why this and God come together and how they come together. It's a little bit of philosophy, I know it is, but that's what it is.
Can I just mention an aside? This has nothing to do with the book of John, but it has to do with a mission. When I was in Brazil,
Yes,
there
ma'am.
was a man at Lawrence Leahy's church he was a lawyer. He had gone and he had gotten special training, and he was going to go. He and his wife and their children were going to go live aboard this mission ship. The name of the ship is Logos. Have you
Logos.
heard of it? It's the largest floating library in the world. It goes all over the world.
That's cool.
And takes Christian books and the
All right.
Word to people all over the world. And I was just so amazed. This man gave up his law practice to go serve on this ship and live in a little stateroom with all the other people because it's staffed. It's huge. It's a huge ship. Well, the last time I was in Brazil, it was actually there.
Okay.
And Felipe's mother got to go on it and see it. I
That'd
didn't
be
get to
cool.
go, but she did. But I just thought that was interesting, and I didn't even make the connection to John until just now that they
The word.
named that ship the Word because they're spreading the word
They're spreading the word.
with that ship. I thought that was. I'm sorry.
No, you're all right.
Interesting. That's all. I'll hush now.
No, you don't have to hush
I'll
now.
try to behave and be quiet.
You're
and
good.
not talk so much.
330 times in the New Testament, Logos comes up. So it's going to be a word that gets used a lot. And so it's important for John to get it on the table. He's going to use this, the Word of God. He's going to use this a lot.
Said I wasn't going to talk, but
Please.
is it always referring to Jesus or do we think it's referring to Jesus?
I think it's referring to Jesus. But, I mean, do we know that?
All 330 times.
I haven't looked at all 330 times. But
Let's
I'm
look
going
at
to
it.
assume that it does because Logos carries such a heavy meaning. You know, from this very section, the Word was with God and the Word was God. And then when it says, again, He was with God in the beginning, now you begin to say, that's got to be Jesus. That's got to be Jesus. I won't go down the rabbit hole like I did with Donna this morning when I told her about it, but we got ourselves in trouble as the church with this idea because the word for God is a masculine noun and the word for this word is a feminine noun. And so in the 80s, you may have heard about it. In the 80s, there was this conversation about this divine, looking at you, Dan Brown, and the Da Vinci Code. There's this concept coming together, like man and woman coming together. And we tried to figure that out, but we tried to get ourselves in trouble with it. And we did. We ticked off people like my father, who was a commissioner, and having to put up with this stuff. But we recognized something else was going on. And got off of that, I hope. Somebody's buzzing the tower there. He didn't hurt anybody. Other things you notice.
Speak of the verse 4 to me speaks of the incarnation. And him is light and light is light again.
It sounds incarnational, doesn't it? But you never hear incarnation, do you? You never hear talking about Mary and Joseph and the stars or any of that sort of stuff. You just hear life, and you automatically clue in.
But they think Jesus with me, they think God more than the Spirit.
As opposed to what?
That's opposed to Jesus coming in incarnation flesh. It's a hard concept for them.
Yeah, I don't know if they...
All those two.
I suppose it is, right? We're doing philosophy of religion now, aren't we? I mean, I don't suppose that... You just carrying something? I don't suppose that they have any... The people of the day, right? The non-Christians of the day, who didn't believe in God or Yahweh, would have said they had physical representations of their God. Like not just a cross on the wall, they would have things. So they would probably want that, and I'm sure the Hebrews, early Christians, the Gentiles were getting in all sorts of trouble because you can't lay hands on your God. Because we've never had any sort of, other than like a burning bush, stuff like that, we've never really had any kind of concrete concept outside of the personhood of Jesus to put our hands on who is God. It's always been other things, voices and clouds, pillars of fire, the bush. Like it's not been able to walk and lay your hands on that God. So incarnational understanding and theology would have been important for them. Yeah. This life, Irving, you're talking about in verse 4, is a combination of both physical and spiritual life. So when John says in him was life, it's not just he breathed life into the people physically, as we would see in Genesis. We're building on, right? He didn't just take Adam and make him out of dust and breathe into him. He created life, the soul in him. Both aspects, spiritual and physical life, coming into him.
So is that kind of, that's the darkness has not understood. Would that be unbelievers?
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's a spiritual thing too.
If you look at John, reference to that verse here in my Bible, in John 3:19, the darkness is referred to there as the darkness of men that because their deeds were evil. That's what it says in that verse.
The Greek is katalambano is the word, which means to seize or to grab a hold of, like to forcefully get your hands. The darkness has tried to not just beat it, but sort of get a hold of it. And we know you can't get a hold of God like that. You can't overcome life that way, life in Christ that way.
But it is interesting
Yeah.
though, because it's, from what Irvin said, 3:19,
Mhm.
the light has come into the world and people love the darkness rather than the light because their works were evil. That's kind of hard for me to understand. You want to be in the dark when I want to be in the light. I'm not afraid of the dark,
Right.
but you would rather be light and not the evil ways. That would just, to me, I have a visual of gruesome, evil,
Mhm.
dark ways, and it seems like that is how we are living now,
Mhm.
because there is so much darkness. And it's just getting darker and darker. Yeah.
Well, if you want to see, flip over your sheet there. On the back of it, since you went to darkness, Stacy,
Okay.
the last one, scotai, a feminine darkness, a brand of moral, spiritual obscurity, which blocks the light of God when faith is lacking. Sound about right?
Yes.
I just kind of threw those. There's 4 concepts that we sort of have in here. You've got word, you've got God, you've got light, and you've got dark. These four kind of pillars are going back and forth. That's how John is setting up his, it's not his argument, but he's setting up his gospel. And you're absolutely right about this darkness. It's not just it's not just a physical darkness. It's even probably past metaphorical.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a lot more to it.
Mm-hmm.
But it also says in verse 4, in him was life, and the life was the light.
Yes.
He's identifying Jesus.
Yes, he is.
And as Bernice just alluded to, that we've already said that in him was life, and life was the light of all people.
Mm-hmm.
So right now there is a light of all people that makes up the life of him. So that is in him. The next part though is what's really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Is in 5 it says the light shines in the darkness. So there is darkness there. There's darkness in the world. There's
Yep.
evil in the world.
Yep.
So there's a light that shines in the midst of the evil. And the next part is what's so powerful is that the darkness is never able to overcome it. So now we have hope right from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
In the midst of the darkness and the evil of the world, there is a light that evil cannot defeat.
Try as it may, and he doesn't deny the suffering that evil brings, does he? The darkness is going to try to overcome this
But there
consistently,
is
but there is hope
There
in
is life.
it.
There's life
That's right.
in Jesus Christ.
That's right.
And that life is in all people.
That's right.
And that life is light that cannot be overcome by evil.
Correct.
Ever.
Ever. Even though it will try to be. I mean, now you've got some hints at atonement theology here. You've got some hints at what Jesus is coming to address. This dark, which is going to just continually press in on us. And it's exactly right, Stacy, right? This is exactly what we're dealing with now. This is exactly what it is. I mean, as I'm sitting reading this, I'm thinking the light shines in the darkness.
You gotta remember
And it feels
too-
very dark. Like we've talked about it 10 different ways as a church in the last month. The dark is everywhere.
You gotta remember too, Stacy, that Satan is the prince of this world.
Mm-hmm.
He has authority here. It's his possession, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's dark, and we're not going to just. I mean, it's here. And we talked about it, just some of the ministries we're getting ready to do, and I can't help but think in some of the things we do that we're addressing that darkness, or we're sort of proclaiming the light in the midst of it, because it feels. I mean, when I hear
You know this.
when I hear that dark, I feel heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Like it feels very heavy to me.
Satan does all he can to keep people from hearing and receiving the gospel. Believe me, that's right.
Mm.
He's the master of that.
Mm-hmm.
But like John said, we have the light in us. We have that opportunity, we have that, God gives us that, but it is a choice, right? Do we want the darkness or do we want the light? And like you said, in this, if the dark is the evil and that's the way the men go, it's easier.
It's easier. Even though if you look at what the light represents, again, above darkness on your sheet, the foes, the manifestation of God's self-existent life. That's what it means. That self-existence of God is here, and the world chooses the other.
Because Satan appeals to the simple nature. He knows which buttons to push. You know?
He does know which buttons to push.
You're right, Stacy. We do have a
He's been doing it a
choice.
long time.
But if we get too wrapped up in that choice, it can be very depressing. Because you can think that even though I have the light, that I could choose evil.
Mm-hmm.
But what this message is saying, is, to me, is even though we might choose that and reject it, God doesn't reject us. That light is still there.
Light's still shining, even
The
when we don't
light is
take
there
it off.
even
Yeah.
if we don't acknowledge it. So we have to be careful when we start thinking about choice, but through our choice, we can turn off the light.
And that last phrase in the ESV, it says the darkness has not overcome.
That's exactly right.
It has tried,
Even though we
but
might
it
see
cannot.
the darkness is never overcome. Now, we might not walk in the light, but God is always there, because that's what's so special about the gospel, is that God never abandons us.
That's the gospel message.
Never abandons us. We don't have to earn our justification and worry about losing it.
And that is part of why every time we do Maundy Thursday, and I end the blessing is always going to be the same. The light has come into the darkness, and the darkness could not overcome it. You know, like even in the most dark time in the life of the church, we remember the death of Jesus. The dark cannot overcome it. Even though it has tried, and it thinks it's won, it cannot overcome it. It is a tremendous word of hope. And you notice how we start with just this, in the beginning was the word, this Genesis idea, and we've all of a sudden branched way out far afield. We haven't just talked about the incarnation of Jesus. We've talked about all of humanity being reconciled to God without even trying to.
Part of the problem too is, we see that in Genesis, that God gave man a free will, and it's been tainted, that it wasn't like he looked like, I don't think it was like originally it was supposed to be, to choose.
Well, and I think that's where Satan comes in, because he's trying to find our weakness, even though we have light, and we know we have light. he's gonna find that weakness in us and weasel his way in.
He knows you better than you know yourself. I think.
Yes. Well, we have a doubt. We have a doubt. And
He's like
That's
Santa Claus.
profound.
He's like Santa Claus, huh?
Yeah.
No, it's right. He does. He finds that way in. I once heard someone say that the mission of our adversary is not to get us to reject God. It is to get us to look away from God, even for a moment. Because if we've done it once, we can do it twice. And I sort of like that idea where it's not like I'm going to tempt you to become a mass murderer. I'm going to tempt you just to look away from
It's doubt.
It's doubt.
Yes.
If you doubt
Yeah. Yep.
this much, you'll doubt that much,
Yeah.
to that much, to that much. And you'll just
Surely
grow.
Surely God didn't mean that all the fruit.
That's
the
it.
garden was-
It's choice, it's doubt, it's the question. And that's where, that's one of the things I think about when I think about what is Satan's role in the world. Is it's not, yes, he is the tempter, and that is his position. But I sometimes wonder if it's just to introduce doubt and say,
Well, that's how we're tempted.
Are you sure? Right? Are you sure you shouldn't eat any of the fruit?
Spread doubt.
Yeah, and that's enough. He doesn't tell Eve, you're going to go eat that apple, or if it was an apple, it could have been a pineapple, whatever it was. You're going to eat that fruit. He just introduces the question. She could have easily turned around and said, no, God has said no, I'm done with you. But the question was, that's the challenge, and that's the darkness.
It's the doubt that really gets to our total deprivation.
Mm-hmm.
Because that doubt, we begin to question. We begin to question.
We begin to question, that's right. We don't take it on faith as much anymore. We begin to say, well, maybe.
That's an interesting connection to faith.
Yeah.
We separate ourselves from faith and go to ourselves.
We go to, as my friend Graham would say, rational functionalism. We start thinking and being functional. Like, well, did he really mean that? Come on. Are you seriously? Well, before you know it, you've given up so much ground spiritually. And we look around as a church and go, why is the world the way that it is? And we have to look at ourselves because we let that happen. We gave ground.
Because we doubt that God's word is really God's word.
Mm-hmm. And the word was in the beginning, Genesis. It was right there at the very start. Why would we think it isn't?
And my thing is,
Yes, ma'am.
at the end of 5, it says, but the darkness has not understood it.
Understood it, yes.
So if you have people, I do understand now as an adult that about the choices we have, but as a growing up person, I did not know that. I did not know that the light of God or whatever was in me, and I did not know I could choose something different. I did not know that. But that came about through other people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like you can just say, okay, I think I'm not going to do this anymore, I'm going to turn to God.
If you don't know, you don't know.
It can work that way, but it seldom works that way, doesn't it? That does happen for some, but the vast majority of us, we need each other to sort of help that process along. Yeah, there are some people who can have that spiritual willpower just to say, I'm doing this, but not me. I can't do it. I'll tell you right now, I can't do it. I wish I could, but I can't do it. I need people around me to keep refreshing the scriptures for me and reminding me.
And then I think too, the people back then, how many truly didn't know? It's easy for us because we have Bibles everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I don't want you getting into the epistles and things like that while we study this. Because we got the rest of the story. Like, we know how it
They
ends.
didn't have anything.
All they have at this point is Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and whatever Mark's source material, because Mark's first, whatever Mark's source material is. That's all they've got. Like, the rest of this stuff they don't have any of this New Testament. They have these pieces from Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and whatever Mark used to create what he did, and that's it. And it's easy for me to be able to flip to Colossians, which talks about the supremacy of Christ, or to read Romans, that great theological text, to sort of strengthen. But they got none of that, so they need each other, because that challenge and that temptation is going to be there consistently for them. What was your word? I say overcome. You said
Understood.
understood. The New Living says extinguish, which I like that one too. Cannot extinguish it. Just depends on how you hear it. Yeah, catalamano, to comprehend, to perceive, to seize. to take possession of it. And you can hear how the darkness tries to kind of overwhelm the light of Christ, and it's just not.
What are they think the book of John was written?
Oh, I was gonna look that up.
Mine says AD 85 to 90.
About right.
That's about right, I'm thinking. Yeah,
I was thinking
89.
85.
Yeah. And the others were much earlier. Oops, don't put that.
But it's after the fall of Jerusalem, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's after Jerusalem has fallen. Yeah, so it's just this.
When you talk about the fall of Jerusalem, you're talking about when the temple was destroyed.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
the Romans came in and
Yeah.
sacked it.
And just wiped them out. Yeah. Which I'm sure that, I mean, I don't know, I can't pretend to be John, but I wonder if some of those ideas were in his mind, thinking these people are going to be very hopeless. And I need to kind of remind
Yeah, yeah, we have to always
You have to
understand
think.
the culture that he's
the
speaking
context,
to.
the context he's in, because he doesn't, we don't have this anywhere else, so. And we'll get into some of the history of John. I mean, I'll have some outlines and some stuff for you to see how it's organized, but tonight, I really just want to spend time on this, kind of getting the groundwork. We'll continue to read here, but just on this, so you understand kind of how it starts. Because how it starts is how he's going to continue to frame his argument, or his point. And I just looked quickly again, I thought it was true, but it is. You don't have, this is his incarnation story. You don't have an incarnation outside of this. There's no Mary, there's no Joseph, there's none of that. You have just this, no wise men. This is the beginning. And really it is, right? This essentially is creation.
This is creation before creation.
Creation before creation, yes. We talked about it in Sunday school a few weeks ago when John Mark was here, about sort of what was happening when God decided to create the world. Like, how did that happen? And I sort of have to wonder if this word and this God were sitting together or standing together or doing whatever they do together and decided, now, let's do this now. And then it happens. But I'd get Mark all excited if he was sitting here talking about that, because he loves to debate that kind of stuff with you. But anything else, just in the prelude, and we'll keep reading here. I don't think we need to. I don't think you need to talk about God, but that's in there if you want to. I left you some thoughts about that when it says in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. The word God, theon, a word of unknown origin. It's uncertain. It's the proper name of God as it is written in the New Testament. So it would be like seeing Yahweh written in the New Testament. Like, this is not just, God, divine, whatever. This is the proper name of God as John has understood it to be. And you've answered all my questions that I gave you in that little summary about it, but well, then will someone read for us, unless there's anything else you want to discuss in here, verses 6 through 13. Okay. Thanks, Donna.
There came a man who was sent from God. His name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all men might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to every man was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God.
Thank you. I see that smirk over there. I saw that. But even in here, I know we don't want to get ahead of the story. Even in here, you're getting little pieces laid out for you. These are going to be concepts you're going to hear him talk to Nicodemus about, aren't you? And you're going to hear, he came to his own and they did not accept him. Wow, that sounds like the atonement, doesn't it? Although they don't know that yet. We don't want to get too far ahead. But you start to hear John creating the framework of how he's going to talk about this man who comes, this Jesus. And interestingly, he only references Jesus one time in this section. It'll be coming up in our next reading, but clear as a bell, you can tell exactly who John is talking about. You know exactly what's going on. In this case, he's talking about John. But what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts?
Well, we're continuing on with that theme of the light.
Yep.
What did you tell us what the Greek was for that? What the
Phos.
meaning? Huh?
Phos, yeah, it's in your handout. Yeah, it's that self, what did I say? It's the self-manifestation of God's light. The divine illumination to reveal and impart life through Christ. It's specifically what it is defined as.
So really, we're talking about God revealed.
I need a drink, so I'm going to go grab some. Yes. God revealed, that's right.
I forget that.
That's okay. My legs work too. Yeah, we're talking about the self-revelation of God that takes place.
I mean, because that's important to understand that every time we see that, we're talking about God being revealed. He came as a witness to testify that God was revealed, so that all might believe through him, not in him, but through him.
Through him.
He himself
The difference.
is not the illuminated God, but he came to testify about the illumination of God.
Mm-hmm. Now, why is that important?
Because we're laying the groundwork that Jesus is God.
That's right. The other gospel authors kind of pull some punches, not this guy.
I mean, we're just laying it out. Jesus is God. This magnificent, illuminating God, this power, this Shekinah.
Mm-hmm. This is God.
This
And
is
he
God.
does it, whereas Jesus will say in the synoptics, don't tell anybody who I am and all this. John is not messing around here, is he? This is God. He's not messing around. I mean, it's clear, very clear.
We have to think too about, he's no longer physically present with them. So, so he has to witness here to more of the light, which is after the spirit here. So,
Yeah, that's a good catch. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, Jesus is God.
He's already ascended, and all.
And even in the language, you get little hints that, again, our English is failing us. It does that, doesn't it? But you're getting this idea when it says in here, there was a man sent from God, or however you have sent. That the verb for sent is apostle. It's apostle. It's apostolo. He's not just a dude sent by God. John is already making a very specific statement that John the Baptizer is an apostle. It's not just a guy, who's going to do something. He's already laying a foundation that this is more than just even a prophet per se coming. This is an apostle coming. This person was really important. And audience, you better remember that when you're reading. I mean, you and I will miss that because we're going to see sent from God. But it's apostolos, the Greek word for apostle. One sent forth, a messenger, a commissioner.
Maybe it will be revealed later, but this is just how my mind works when I read scripture like this. Why was it important for him to start off by saying about this man, John?
Well, they would want to put their trust in him, and he does not want that.
I mean, I don't know that we can answer that. But
We don't have an answer
But
to
it's
that.
just weird that you're going to start talking about Jesus, and right off the bat, you start talking about John the Baptist. How is that relevant to this story? We know how it's relevant.
Well, down the line we do, but at this moment, yeah.
But in John proclaiming the story of Jesus, why is this paragraph relevant right here at the beginning? It has to be, or it wouldn't be there.
It wouldn't be, that's right. Especially when you say that only in 17 is he going to say Jesus Christ. Like, he's going to say John a bunch. He's only going to say Jesus once. So it's important. I wonder, my first guess, John, would be that it's a little hierarchical. You know, that so he's pointing this direction, but I think that's a so what. That's another so what on top of
these
it.
are just questions that, when I approach Scripture, I ask these questions.
Yeah.
I'm hoping it's going to be revealed somewhere down the line, or it's going to come to me.
We never really get that, do we, though? Because he's going to, right as we get to chapter 2, he's going to start, you know, he's going to go wedding at Cana, Nicodemus, woman at the well. Like, Garrett is thinking about it. He's going to go right to the Gentiles.
Trying to tell them something they're already familiar with through the other Gospels. I don't know. It's just, I don't know if we can ever figure that out. It's just a...
Was this the last gospel written?
The last canonized gospel
The
written.
one, last of
Yeah,
the four?
I suspect there's other stuff that's been written that's ended up on the cutting room floor. But this is the last gospel
Okay,
message.
so in chronological order, this is
Oh,
the
by
last
far.
one. Okay.
The technical order is Mark, Matthew, Luke.
And then Rome falls and John comes up.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to know why they're placed in the Bible in the order they're in. That would be I'd like to read about that.
Well, they're going the other way. Okay.
Yeah.
So, the Lord be with them.
Interesting broadcast.
Yeah. So that's we're broadcasting.
Music
Sirens,
from the church and
sirens, and that's fun.
An occasional dog.
And meanwhile, the preacher's leaning and ducking and weaving as this large bee is flying around here. Why are they put in that order, Ernie's? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John?
I'd be interested to know.
I'm not sure, to be honest with you, because
I'm gonna look
the
it up.
epistles, the New Testament, the rest of it is written in word count. Romans is the longest book Paul wrote, followed by 1 Corinthians, followed by 2nd, and so on and so forth. That's so on and so forth.
I never knew that.
Yep. But that's not the case, because Mark's the shortest gospel. He's only got 16 chapters. So that's not true either. So there is a reason. I have to look it up.
I'll look it up. I'm interested.
That is I suspect John is last. If knowing what I just told you, John is last because he is not synoptic. He is not chronological. But that's a guess. Educated, but that's a guess. But we can look that up. So if you at home know that, let us know.
You know, the other three gospels center more on Jesus' actual life and ministry, and this takes us beyond that.
Well, but it's going to take us into it in the next chapter. I mean, he's going to the wedding at Cana next. It's going to take us in there.
They were witnesses too, also much in a way, such as John the Baptist. I think the other gospel writers were. You know, this is a transition time for here. He's taking us. God is taking us beyond this now.
I'd have to look.
And we see Jesus' real identity, I think, in this.
I'd have to look. You can look it up. If you have a study Bible and you look in the beginning of your study Bible, it will tell you. Matthew, Mark, and Luke each have a specific audience. They're preaching to the Jews. They're preaching to this. Luke's talking to the Gentiles. There's a specific audience. John does not have that. He's hitting everybody. He's hitting the Hellenists. He's hitting the Samaritans. He's talking to the Romans. He's hitting everybody. He's not just going
In the rest of
to one group of people.
The rest of the New Testament, to me, seems it kind of flows out from all of it. Do you see it before? You know?
Well, from John, I don't know about from John. From the Gospels, yeah. I mean, because they all kind of come together and they paint the picture.
Into the book of Acts, and then the book of Acts is a
The book of Acts springboards you into the New Testament church. Yeah.
But in verse 11, he's alluding to the fact that his own people didn't accept him. His own did not accept him.
Yeah, the
So
Hebrews
he's
did not take
alluding-
him.
He's alluding to the fact that, he was for everyone. I think that's.
Mm-hmm.
So there is some historical outlining going on here.
There is. I mean, you're going to see once Jesus starts his ministry in 2, it'll be the wedding at Cana. But before he does that, he's going to call them.
Introduction. You see, who is this Jesus?
Yep.
What came next? Well, there's this man John that came, and the people rejected him. And we're kind of laying out this image of this, and you got to remember that this is probably a generation of people since Jesus.
Oh, absolutely, because he dies in what,
He died in
33?
33, and this is 80.
This is 80, 90, so
So it's not like these are people who already were there.
As you say, you probably are first generation past. These are probably the students of the disciples
He was
hearing
the last
this.
disciple that John Senior.
Yeah, these are probably students of those remaining 11 disciples. I mean, I don't think they're going to die that quick, but they do die pretty quickly. So you've got people who don't have a memory, per se, of what was it like when we sat on that mountainside, you told us that sermon. They're not going to have that. Because these people may not have even been there.
You're not gonna have, I was there.
You're not going to have I was there stuff. No. And that's going to shake, that will shake John's ministry and John's message. I mean, I think, Irving, you talked about it last week. We talked about where should we go next. Or no, it was Edie, actually, who asked about John 17, that the large prayer that Jesus prays for the church, only recorded there. So the message is very specific. Such a wide gospel beginning, and we didn't even try, did we? What else? What other thoughts do you have as we look at this beginning? Hey, there you go. And the Lord said, let there be light, and there was a little bit of light.
But it will help, but it can't hurt.
I find it also curious, it's not curious, but it's interesting that, whereas again, other gospels will be a little more coy about it, right from the beginning you get the evangelistic message, don't you? That everyone, in verse 13, to all who received him and believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God. It is, you've got the full evangelistic message laid right out at the beginning. Whereas others have to discover it, John is laying it there for you right from the beginning. And I do think the lights are helping a little bit because they're starting to warm up a little bit there. You're starting to see a little better.
It'll get brighter.
Here, go ahead. We'll shoot you up there. What other thoughts do you have here? Or what other questions does this bring to mind?
John the Baptist he's mentioned in Malachi, verse 1.
Mm-hmm. That's the prophecy of him. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Whereas Matthew will give you the narrative. Matthew gives you the narrative of John, Zechariah, Elizabeth, the kind of what happens there. All we get is really, we learn about his station here. He is an apostle sent by God to prepare the way, to testify to it. And Ernest, I know you like when we do a little bit of word study. You could word study all night every verb that's in here because they're so rich. There's so much to just kind of pick on.
Malachi 3:1, it tells you that what was his mission in John the Baptist was
Mhm.
to prepare the way before me. Yeah. That's exactly what it says it was.
Mm-hmm. He was preparing the way.
Yeah. And then it tells you a little bit more about him. In other verses, if you look at Malachi 3 and 2 and 3, it tells you a little bit more about John the Baptist.
Mm-hmm. It does. It does. All right, well, someone read for us 14 through 18 then, and we'll actually get what John considers to be, what passes for John's incarnational story. 14 through 18. But go ahead.
King James, y'all be patient.
Well, I think you're going to find, though, that I suspect you'll find in the King James a certain degree of romantic poeticness in this, because this is the incarnation, so this is going to be good.
Verse 14.
Yes.
And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. And we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. John bare witness of him, and cried, saying, This was he of whom I spake. He that cometh after me is preferred before me, for he was before me. And of his fullness have all we received, and grace for grace. For the law was given by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ. No man has seen God at any time. the only begotten Son, which is in the bosom of the Father, he hath declared him.
Thank you, Reverend. And when I got into trouble, because I did, when I got into trouble writing my statement of faith to be ordained, and I went to my theological professor, or they signed me my theological professor, and basically said, he'll fix you and have you, get your language cleaned up. He took me right here because of the fact that they were having issues with my issues of gender and God the Father and God the Son and all this. And he took me right here and he said, this is how God reveals himself, the Father-Son relationship. If they have a problem, have them come and talk to me. Which always makes me smile when I remember Andrew saying that. Have them come and talk to me, and I will set them right. Because God chooses to identify himself right here as the Son of the Father. So this is the incarnation. Are you satisfied with this incarnation? Not with the person of Jesus, but does this do it?
It's pretty specific.
I'm sorry?
It's pretty specific.
How so?
It says exactly who he is.
It's not very vague, is it? He is the Son of the
Doesn't
Father.
mince any words.
He does not. And interestingly, he already refers to Jesus as the Christ. So even in the beginning, again, is another reference to his death.
There's a lot of powerful words in this.
Oh my goodness, there is.
We have seen his glory. We got glory.
Yes, you do.
You've got Father's only Son.
Mm-hmm.
So that there are no others. He's not one of many. This is the Father's only Son.
Yep.
And then we have he's full of grace and truth. Those are two powerful words that are used all the way through Christ's witness. The grace and truth.
And he brings in the law of Moses and says that's, we're getting grace and truth through Jesus.
Yeah, hence in the New Testament here, the word is doxa. Praise, honor, glory. Always in a positive way. This is very powerful. Like, that's why I said, when you read it in the King James, it's going to be good, because this is it, right? There is grace, there is truth, there is life.
Came by grace, truth came by Jesus' life. And by his life, what he's done for us, we can also have this grace and truth.
Another word for grace, it's the Greek word charis, C-H-A-R-I-S, charis, a gift or blessing brought to humanity by Jesus Christ. It's a favor.
God's riches at Christ's expense.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I like that.
It just goes, from his fullness, we have all received grace upon grace. What does that mean? Grace upon grace.
All right. Parse it out. What does it mean? Grace upon grace. What does that say?
Unending.
What's that?
Unending.
Unending? You hear some abundance, don't you, in that?
Is it that simple? I don't know. I'm just asking. I don't know.
No, well, it's two different forms of the verb. It's the same root for grace.
Upon grace. It could just be unending, bountiful, continuous.
Continuous grace. We get more, we get more grace than we think we deserve, more grace than we think we can handle, more grace than we thought was possible in the person of Jesus.
But grace and truth are important terms here, because he says it again. The law indeed was given through Moses, but here again we have it. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. So grace, I guess we take that as mercy, and truth is truth. Truth is.
Well, they're two different words.
I know that they're different words, but grace I'm equating with mercy.
Well, my roommate used to, when I asked him how to define grace for me, he would say God's unmerited favor. That's how he would say.
Yeah.
That's how he would say God's unmerited favor. You can't earn that. And truth being sort of, where's that? Where are we at here? We're in 17. Let me tell you what truth is. Grace and truth. Yep. Truth being Truth, not merely spoken as truth, true ideas, reality, sincerity, truth in the moral sphere, divine truth, straightforwardness.
So it's important to define this idea up front and early and often.
Yes. Especially because, again, when we get to 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, Jesus is going to specifically go start meeting with sinners and people he shouldn't be doing things with. And this character that John is creating of who Jesus is, like his character, how he defines him, is going to speak for him.
Right, because that's how he's able to go to these bad people, because he's full of grace.
And truth. Like he's got
He's speaking truth.
He's speaking truth,
And
and
he's
yet
showing
he's
it.
charitable and gracious.
That's right.
He's willing to sit by the woman, getting ahead, willing to sit beside the woman at the well, who is as much of an adulteress as possible. And it doesn't bother him, even though, yes, she's broken the law, and he knows it and says it, but yet he's bestowing favor upon her and grace. And that grace that transforms her does the same thing at night with Nicodemus. He'll do the same thing to the Gerasene demoniac. He'll do these things over and over. It builds upon itself, this grace and truth. We're defining who Jesus is without
Very
talking.
foundational, because as you get into this and you start saying, well, why would this holy man go eat with lepers or eat with sinners?
And that's what the Jews asked, right?
That's right.
That was the Hebrew question.
Well, here's
why will you do this?
Because he's full of grace.
I have a question.
Okay.
In the million laws they had, were they not supposed to ever associate with anybody that was in any way, I guess what they call
Unclean.
unclean?
Yeah. Holy people did not do this.
You're not defiled.
Which I see that look, right? I agree with you. It's like, well, shouldn't those be the people we care for?
Well, you
That's
would
what
think.
Jesus said.
That's what Jesus will tell you,
That's
right?
why I came.
Yeah, the Hebrews would not spend time with them, right? Even though the law
So this is
told
why
them
they
to.
were so appalled, and why the Pharisees kept coming back and saying, he's going to eat. I just read about going to the Zacchaeus and how he went to
Mhm.
eat with
That's
him,
in John.
and they all had a hissy fit.
Because Jesus is going where he's not supposed to go. So they're holding up that law side, that truth, like he doesn't belong there and that his character shouldn't fit there. But they're leaving out the grace part. That he does, he's both. He's the completion. He's not abolishing the law, but what is he'll say himself, I come to complete it.
But
How-
again, that's human
Mhm.
making that call.
Exactly. Yeah, we are the ones who say you shouldn't be doing that.
Right.
I sort of talk about this a little bit on Sunday as we're talking, because the text for Sunday is out of Matthew, and we're talking about the call of the disciples, and how Jesus sees that the people are like sheep without a shepherd, and so he has a response. He calls followers, because we would be the ones to say, not present company excluded, right? But we would be the ones to say, no, not you, no, not you. We would do that because we do that. I do that. But here we're learning Jesus doesn't do that, aren't we? We're saying that's not his character. And we haven't even had to really have a character sketch, and we barely had the name. And yet we're getting a sense of who the Messiah is in a very profound way. I hope it's profound, but it's in a profound way. What else is in here that you're sort of noticing and thinking about? The questions that come up or thoughts you want to highlight? All right, then let's continue with our John the Baptist. Will someone read 19 through 28 at this point?
This is the testimony given by John when the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who are you?" He confessed and did not deny it, but confessed, "I am not the Messiah." And they asked him, "What then? Are you Elijah?" He said, "I am not." "Are you a prophet?" He answered, "No." Then they said to him, "Well, who are you? Let us have an answer for those who sent us. What do you say about yourself?" He said, "I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord, as the prophet Isaiah said. Now, they had been sent from the Pharisees. They asked him, why then are you baptizing if you are neither Messiah, nor Elijah, nor prophet? And John answered them, I baptize with water. Among you, I baptize with water. Among you stands one whom you do not know, the one who is coming after me. I am not worthy to untie the thong of his sandal. This took place in Bethany, across from the Jordan, where John was baptizing.
I just noticed that. I didn't even pick that up till right now. You're probably gonna go, well, yeah, we knew that. But Bethany, that's also the place near where he goes and has them get the donkey to ride him to the holy city. You probably knew that already, but that's right, that's Bethany. He sends the disciples into Bethany to go and get that donkey for him to ride into town. So they think they know who John is, or they question who John is. But do they really know?
They're clueless.
They're totally clueless.
I'd not noticed this before.
Mm-hmm.
The second part of that, I baptize with water. Among you stands one whom you do not know.
Yeah.
It implies that somebody else is in that crowd.
I have thought this myself before. I have wondered about this too.
And maybe he's just saying in the larger scope of society, or the group.
Yeah.
But the way
It doesn't read
I'm not
that
sure.
way.
Of course, we're reading a translation.
But no, it certainly, I totally agree, John. It certainly reads like Jesus might have been leaning up against the oak tree. The olive tree, just leaning up against the olive tree over there watching this whole thing. It certainly reads that way, doesn't it? One stands among you.
That's just because of the way we read the text.
Let me pull my New Living up here and take a gander.
It's probably, I'm not gonna guess. But,
Well, so the New Living, I've told you before, the New Living goes back to the original notes before the King James people did their thing and starts over. Verse 26, John told them, I baptize with water, but right here in the crowd is someone you do not know.
oh, so they are saying that he's right there amongst them.
That's shocking to me.
Yeah.
That's what the New Living is saying now.
Because I was thinking that it was saying that already alive, already living in our world, there is somebody here. But that's saying that it's right there. What is, well, I'll look it up.
What is what? I got it pulled up here.
What's the Bible Hub say?
What's the Bible Hub say? That's
What's the
it.
interlinear say?
Yeah, that's on the interlinear.
Greek.
That's what are we? We're in 25?
Maybe.
No, that's not it. That can't be it.
26.
That cannot be it. Answered them John, saying, I baptize with water, but in the midst of you, mesos, occurs 3 times. In the middle, between. Yeah, right in the midst of you.
And mine says among you
Yeah.
stands.
And remember I told you that John uses words from somebody else? It's a word from Homer. This is specifically a Homer word.
In your midst.
In your midst is someone.
Well, it's interesting, but we'll never figure that out. Midst could be, you'd have to know what that actually meant.
Well, I mean,
We know what midst means, but it didn't mean right there, or it didn't mean.
Well, let me do this. I'll
In
show
the
you this,
world.
okay? I'll show you this right here, okay? See where it says Strong's New Testament right here?
Yeah.
All of that is consideration of what in the midst means. And so there's a lot to pick on to sort of gnaw on. But either way, whether it's, I think at the very least you're hearing in the midst of your country,
He's already here.
he's already on earth.
I think
here.
that's probably.
At the least you're hearing he's already nearby.
He's already here.
But that's the cynic, but the sarcastic whatever in me says, they didn't have internet, they didn't have newspapers. They got this guy down by the river who's doing all this baptizing, which has never been done before. And we know the crowds are flocking to John because we've read it other places. It's not inconceivable that Jesus is, well, I'm sure he's aware of it, but it's not inconceivable that he's not been nearby.
Well, he walks out of the crowd to get baptized.
Yeah, it's not like he makes an appointment.
Later on, when he gets baptized, he's in the crowd and he just walks up. So it's very possible that he's watching Cousin John.
And why didn't John notice? So why didn't John notice?
Which the baptism? You mean?
If Jesus is standing in the midst, did he know he was there?
Well,
He said he did.
He said he was one
No,
year amongst
but
you.
I mean, is he there? He's right over there. Did he notice?
Maybe he was afraid, maybe he didn't think that Jesus wanted him to point him out.
Mm-hmm. Well, the question, I mean, the answer to what I'm wondering about is my fishing question is, were his eyes too veiled at that point? Now, the Messiah's here someplace, but only when Jesus chooses to walk from the crowd do the scales fall from his eyes. I don't know. Wasn't there.
You'd have to say that John didn't know who his cousin was to go down that road.
Yeah, you would, wouldn't you? That'd be a little tricky. Yeah, his cousin's in the room.
I mean, they've grown up together, and
You would hope. It's not a big area, Israel.
that's a story for another day.
Yeah, but I think at the very least, though, what you probably could conclude is that it makes this story a little more personal. We have as we read this, we have John standing behind sort of a symbolic pulpit, kind of doing this. It doesn't read that way, does it? It seems more intimate. And we also don't have John just doing this at the Pharisees.
He's battling the Pharisees.
He's battling
They're
them.
coming at him. Are you this? Are you that? He's saying,
Nope, wrong.
yes again.
Would he have actually answered though? If they said, "Are you the voice of the one in the wilderness?" Would he have said, "Yes"? I don't know how that would have happened, but doesn't matter because you didn't do it. It's not in the scriptures, but it's definitely a curious statement, isn't it?
So that in itself is an interesting concept, the voice of the wilderness. What is that? What is the wilderness? What is the voice symbol? It's obviously a
The
prophet.
purpose of all this baptism, though, is to read on living in the chapter. We introduce Jesus.
But do they baptize before this moment?
Jesus baptized after this.
And he's baptizing
This is the
after this,
baptism
but
of
before
confession
Jesus.
way.
But I mean, let's say 6 weeks. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? 6 months before this moment, did this concept exist?
There's an interesting question. When did baptizing begin?
Because they don't seem to be too cranky about him baptizing. But you don't have any reference in the Old Testament to baptizing.
So what did baptizing mean to the Pharisees?
They have no concept. They have no clue of the concept, and yet they're mad about the concept.
They had a ritual bath or something
They had ritual bathing, but that was
When they went to the
purification.
temple, and
But that was purification for the temple. That wasn't this.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to the temple. They're in the middle of water. They're out in the wilderness. This is a new concept.
Transforming. Are you transforming people? Are you
In the,
But they had some kind of concept.
They had
because-
something.
Because they said, why are you baptized?
That's right.
That's right.
Are you a prophet?
Yeah.
So somebody somewhere, they
Did
had-
something. That's right.
They had something, some knowledge of it.
There's a question for the theologian.
Our Baptist friends will appreciate this because baptismo or baptizo, one of the authors who has worked on the language for it says specifically properly to submerge. So our Baptist friends will like that. Say submerge, don't sprinkle them, but hence baptize to immerse, literally to dip under.
in the commentary for the voice, a voice of one calling in the desert, prepare the way for the Lord. John recalled that from Isaiah.
Okay.
He did not, it was curious to me when they asked him who he was, the first thing he said was, I am not the Christ. So why would he do that?
Yeah. Why would you jump to that? They didn't ask you that.
And then he denied, in their minds, there were 4 options. He could have been a prophet, the prophet foretold by Moses, Elijah, the Messiah, or a false prophet. John denied being the first three personages. Instead, he called himself, in the words of the Old Testament prophet Isaiah, a voice of one calling in the desert, prepare the way for the Lord.
So to answer the comment about they had to have some sort of understanding of this idea, because why are they getting cranky if Jesus is, or John is doing it? 81 times in the scriptures we have this word for baptize. But only in relation to Jesus and John do we have it like this. So something's here. We just don't really fully understand what it is. But yeah, they don't even accuse him of being the Christ, but he says he's not.
Well, and then somewhere he says, and it may be, I don't know where, he baptizes with water, but somebody's going to come and baptize with fire.
Oh, he's about to do that. Yeah, we won't get there tonight, but he's about to do that.
So maybe that's, maybe he didn't even know exactly what he was doing when he started the baptizing with the water.
I don't think that's completely impossible. Because do we not obey the Lord sometimes and step out in faith and just say, well, I got to do this because God told me to, and I don't fully understand it, but I'm submitting to it.
Based on what Donna just read, and that's what I was thinking a while ago, I think that he started this gospel with John because John was the fulfillment of that Isaiah passage. And so he's starting at the beginning, which I guess he thought in the beginning, and then he jumped to John in the beginning because he was the one that was going to tell people that Jesus was coming.
So it looks like, as I'm just reading on the fly here, it looks like the Pharisaical idea of baptism from the Old Testament would really be just a ceremonial washing. It really would just be gathering water to ceremonially wash, but not really to wash. Like we did at Seder when I washed my hands when we started, it's that sort of an idea. It's not really like take a bucket of water and pour it over your head. It's a little more ceremonial. But again, Jesus and John God takes this a step further, doesn't he? And turns this into the sacrament, one of our two sacraments. You know, he turns it into something more than that. And it's also a reference, but you know that I don't have to, this is not going to be news to you, but it's also a reference, isn't it, to the Red Sea crossing. Passing through the waters. Things like that. So this will have memory for the Hebrews. When they see this, there will be memory of this. Anything else in this section that you want to highlight tonight? Next week, we're going to stop here at 28, and we'll pick up with the Lamb of God being baptized. We won't quite get to it next week, but if you want to understand how the synoptics work differently than the Gospel of John, just look at John chapter 2, verse 13, where Jesus clears the temple. That's much later, isn't it, in the rest of the Passion narrative, but he has it second. So it's a little different. And next week I'll have some more handouts for you on sort of timeline. If you happen to have, it's a very good one if you happen to have a Life Application Study Bible and you look, there's a very, very, very detailed, I'll bring a copy of it for you, there's a very, very, very detailed chronological outline of Jesus' life, ministry, and death, how that flows. And you just see John in and out of there, all over the place, just to be different. Well, I hope this was edifying and blessing to you. It was definitely to me. It's much different than what we've been studying, but we're going to continue to go at this pace. And like I said, that's how we do it, right? We just sort of take our time and we go through it. And we'll have a little bit of time to have a little snack if you want to before you go, but let's close in some prayer together. As we go our separate ways, loving God, be with us and help us to continue to spend time in this, your word, and to grow in our knowledge and understanding of it. In Jesus' name, amen.